Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields. And today I've got longtime coaching client and friend, physical therapy owner, Steve Edwards out of Las Vegas, Nevada with Achieve Physical Therapy. Steve, we've talked for a number of years, man. It's nice to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm kind of excited to be here, share my ideas, thoughts, whatever, story.
Yeah. For the audience, they don't know you, of course. And I've known your story here now since we've talked for a couple of years up until this point. But let the audience know a little bit about where you're coming from, what you're doing.
Well, yeah, like you said, we worked together there for a couple of years. So I'm an owner of Achieve Physical Therapy, and I use that term extremely loosely because I was basically a physical therapist that saw patients and tried to ignore everything else, right?
Okay.
Well, a lot like the other owners you had. So 17 years ago, started Achieve Physical Therapy with a business partner. And over that time, made a decent living, but just found myself just digging a deeper and deeper and deeper hole, where you've got to see the patients, you're not comfortable being away from the clinic, and find myself just being tied down to it even more and more and more.
Did you notice it while you were going through it?
You know what? Not in the beginning.
Did you kind of just accept that this is what it is? This is the grind.
Yeah.
If I'm an owner, this is what I signed up for kind of attitude, right?
Exactly. This is what you're going to do. And I look at the PTs that have been out of school, kind of about the same time as us, where, you were in a busy clinic, whether it was in your internship or as a technician, and then maybe right out of school, outpatient, busy clinic. And so all you ever saw was just seeing tons and tons of patients.
And that was your job.
Yeah, right. And so when you go out on your own and you're doing that, but now you have all of these other duties stacked on top of you, you're just like, I don't have time for that. So if I ignore it, maybe it'll go away and I'll just work on patients. And hopefully the billing will come in correctly and we'll get paid. And for the most part you do, and then other times you don't, you worry about that. But I just found myself just digging that hole just deeper and deeper and deeper and finding that there wasn't any escape,
What was the emotional toll, psychological toll, or the burden that now looking back, maybe you didn't recognize at the time, but now you can see what was the toll on you in your life?
Well, there was one experience in particular that I always think back to, and it's probably been a good 10 years. But I hadn't taken a day off in 18 months.
Wow.
Which is not anything to brag about. It's actually, I look back at my family and I think, what was I doing to them? But I took a day off because my wife was getting admitted to the hospital.
Okay.
And that is I'm not saying that was the turning point, because of course I went back to doing the same thing, but I realized I am tied to this and I'm not comfortable. And I don't know how to get away from it. I found myself putting the business in front of my family, in front of anything else, in front of vacations. If you did take a vacation, right, it was just a couple of days. I think there was burnout, and something you always talk about too is when you're with the patient and you're working on a patient, then you find yourself thinking about all of the things that you're not doing as a business owner. And so your full attention, again, isn't to the patient, but I got to see the patient because that's how I make a living. And that's just, So it was just that vicious cycle of see patient, worry about the business, don't take time off, get paid, and not sure how to get out of that.
Mm-hmm. The partnership wasn't going well at the time, from what I remember.
Yeah, in the beginning, it was fantastic. And then every time there was an issue, we just doubled down on what we were doing. So we'd open another clinic.
Oh.
And then we kind of ran into issues. And we're like, well, we heard this is going well over here, so we'll open another clinic. And my business partner moved out of state to run another clinic. And I'd stayed here and was running two clinics. And when I say running two clinics, I was ignoring two clinics, but working in both, so double feeling. And eventually we just got to the point where he took that clinic, and the second clinic, I just kind of sold that off to the guy who was managing it. Just for the price of the equipment. Basically, I just said, hey, if you'll just take this off my hands, so I don't have to worry about it. It was like that for a very long time until COVID. COVID forced me to not see as many patients, to kind of step back. I had a little time. And I remember it was April. So it was maybe a month into COVID. And I was sitting at home. I pulled my computer out, dining room table, kitchen table there, and I was just typing away. And I pulled up this document. I titled it Belief Ceiling, because I was like, there are people out there that are physical therapists that are making a living and not doing what I'm doing. There's another recipe. There's a way around this. So first things I started typing was, how much do I want to make per patient? How much freedom do I want? And I started typing out these different things. And then I typed out what I am making per patient, how many hours I'm working, what my beliefs are about this. And I didn't know how to change those beliefs, in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I'd always seen. This is what I'd always done. I didn't, mathematically, when I type it out on a calculator or start punching in the numbers, it just didn't work in my brain. There was no way around it. And so,
just to interrupt really quick. So when you're looking at this gap between what you want and where you are, what are you thinking at the time? Like, that's impossible?
Yeah. So there was that thought, right? And I even typed that. I'm like, I typed this out. I just want to type my thoughts out, right? So I could come back to them. Like, I don't know how to do this, but I know that so-and-so down the street is doing this. There's a way to do it, but I do not know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And I knew that my buddies in other states were doing it as well. And granted, their reimbursement was dramatically different. So I understood their pathway a little bit better. But other people that were here in the same city that I am, they seem to be making it work. And so I was like, obviously the pathway exists. I just don't know how to do that. And so, I just stewed on those thoughts for a while. And then in June, a couple of months later, right, a buddy of mine who's an attorney here in town, he sent me a text and he's like, hey, I don't know if you're interested in this, or if it's any interest to you, but this PT host of this podcast is an old college roommate of mine. He's maybe worth a listen. Just check it out if you want to. And so it was your podcast, right? Mm. Yeah. And so I think it was like a week later, I was driving around, running some errands, and I listened to the first two podcasts, right? Yeah. First two episodes. And the one where you and Will were talking, I think I shared this with you, but the one where you and Will were talking just really hit home with me about how he had set all of his files on his passenger seat and the airbag sensor would go off. And man, that was my life, going back and forth between those two clinics. And it just spoke to me. And I was like, and then hearing you guys talk, I was like, okay, this is my path. This is how I change things. This is what we do. So anyway, so I reached out to you, and that's when we started working together right there.
Yeah.
During COVID.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember you coming on and sharing that story that you'd listened to the podcast. Of course, the connection with the college roommate was really cool. Kind of amazing that didn't start then when your friend reached out to the podcast. I almost feel like it's hard to have that 2020, but if you hadn't started that process back in April of the pandemic, where you sat down at the computer and wrote out those thoughts and recognized the gap, somehow you do an exercise like that, or you put some thoughts and some beliefs on paper, the universe kind of starts tilting towards that. I've seen that far too often.
Yeah, and I believe that 100%. Because definitely I was open to it by then, because I've been thinking about it, and things just started falling in line. And I remember going to my wife at that time. I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to reach out to this guy and do some coaching. And she said, she was 100% on board, right? She wanted me to get some help. She'd seen it. And she was fine with it too. She was like, hey, listen, I want you to work with him, and whatever decision we decide to make, that this helps, or we decide, hey, listen, this just isn't working anymore, we need to move on from it. She said, whatever. I just don't want you to approach it from a sense of, not to get into the scarcity abundance as much, but I don't want you to approach it from that scarcity where I have no options. Let's figure out where you're at, and then we'll make some decisions.
Yeah. So, I don't want to dwell too much on what we did over our coaching history, but what were some of the things that you noticed right off the bat that was difficult for you to address with the coaching, that maybe I had brought up a number of times and you resisted, that maybe you have worked past at this point?
Well, number one was setting time aside just to even coach. I mean, that was my very first hurdle.
Really?
Reached out. It was an hour and a half we were going to have to meet
Yeah.
for. We were thinking, okay,
Twice a month.
yeah. And I'm like, well, I take lunch, but realistically, about 10 minutes late for lunch. It's an hour, so 50 minutes. I was thinking, how can I get an extra half an hour? I mean, how pathetic is that? It's just that mindset. How can I get away for even a half an hour?
You were probably, if you were like me, you're also thinking, I could probably see that many patients in the hour. Right. So not only am I paying this guy, but I'm losing the revenue that I could have generated through seeing those patients. I would have gone that far and been that petty, not recognizing.
Because you're thinking you are the one bringing in the money here. You're losing money. So that was a big step for me, just to be able to go, okay, let's just set time aside. And that kind of led into, okay, now we're going to set some time aside to actually run the business.
Some admin time, actually scheduled admin time outside that is not weekends, not nights. It's during business hours, right?
Yeah. That was probably my biggest hurdle, was just being able to say no, and to address that and to tell my front office I'm not available during this. And that's foreign to them, right? Because they're always, hey, Steve, we're putting the patient here, we're doing this. And I think
but they were supportive. I remember when you started, they were supportive. When you told them you were going to do that, they were supportive. And if I'm not mistaken, you tried to open up your treatment hours again, and they resisted you to get back into it.
Yeah, they were really excited about me coaching, because I think they wanted some direction. There was no direction. They were just in jobs. And I think, I look back on that now and I see the therapists. I had great therapists that worked for me, but they would leave. They just burn out. I'm just asking like so much of them without any direction.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that just kind of led into the crucial conversations as well, and things that, I'm a classic avoider. Even though I know it's there, if I pretend like it's not, then I seem to think that the world will be okay. And that's not obviously a way to run a business or your life. And so that helped me get into dealing with conversations. I had time. We did our leadership meeting. We could address issues. And so it just opened the door for so many other portions of the business to be successful or to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And there were opportunities, like you said, to start. Well, I remember you saying, I'm dealing with issues now that I know I've had to dealt with for the past decade that I've never dealt with, and finally am resolving them. I mean, we're establishing standard operating procedures, policy and procedure manuals, these kind of things. I'm actually having intentional meetings and giving direction to my front office team, my biller, my marketer, and front desk, and how I want things to be run. Because you and I know you're treating patients, but you're hearing the conversations that are going at the front desk, and you're like, that's not how I want that to be done. And then you just forget about it, right? But you're finally addressing those things to really lead and own the business, right?
Yeah. And, the great thing about that was that the individual who's my administrator, who's been with me for since 2007, but we worked together at another clinic. I hired her when she was 18 as a technician.
Oh, wow.
And so she's just kind of, I moved, started a clinic, and then eventually she caught up with us several years later. But she was excited about it. She was excited about all of these procedures and policy and writing that up and being a part of that. And, the more I give her, the more she just seems to blossom or just really enjoy that. And so those are things that I would have never done because I was ignoring everything. Just, if your head in the sand, you'll go away. So there are people on the team that wanted more, that wanted to be involved, and that, really flourish as a result.
Yeah. And you had some big goals. I remember from our initial meeting, but one of the hurdles, this is what we definitely want to talk about today, is your average reimbursement per visit when you did that exercise in April was horrific. What was the number?
Yeah. $67 a visit.
$67 a visit, right? What did you want it to be? When you wrote it down, I don't know this answer. What did you want it to be?
Yeah. Well, it was like it was a pipe dream to think that I could get $100 a visit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Like that's as far as my brain could go. I couldn't think beyond $100 a visit. Now I look back at that 2 years later and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I wasn't even beginning to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
But I just, so when I typed that, I was thinking, this is impossible, but I'm going to write down $100 a visit. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but yeah, pretty incredible.
That's
Yeah.
so exciting. So it's so cool to hear because from the very beginning, I'm not good at like holding back in some of those situations when things are that severe, but you had a contract. What were they paying you? $45 a visit?
36.
Oh my gosh, I was being generous. They're paying you
Yeah.
$36 a visit. And this was a large chunk of your patient population.
Yeah, it was between 28 and 30% of my total
Paying you
patient.
$36 a visit. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure in that first visit, I was like, well, you got to drop them.
Yeah.
But and I know you were resistant to that for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, other times, like my staff would hear me just punching numbers on the calculator and they'd be like, oh no, what's he doing? And I so many times I would try to come up with a way to be able to drop this insurance, but it was basically what I'm taking home. It was my salary, and so I didn't see a way around dropping this insurance and
making a salary.
Yeah. So I was going to work for free. And so I didn't know how to get past that. If I drop this insurance, now I'm just working for free.
Wow. Yeah. And that wasn't your only bad pair. You had some bad pairs that were below $60 a visit, right?
Yeah. So we had quite a few others that were below that $60 a visit, aside from just the Sierra.
Like if you had Sierra was 20 to 30% of your patient volume, but then you had these others too. Are we talking this is like 30, 40, even 50% of your patient volume?
Yeah. So Blue Cross Blue Shield was another 18%.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then we've got another pair that is right around that $60 mark that is it's probably 27, 28%.
Oh my gosh.
Cigna was a really low payer, but it was maybe 1% of our business. So that was easy to get rid of. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So what were some of the reasons for keeping these low payers? And I know you might not be through it all just yet. I know you're one by one knocking these out, and it started with the Sierra low payer and including these others as you go down the line. And I'm sure people who are listening in the future will notice that you're going through this in stages. But what was your mindset before starting this? What held you back? What were you thinking? What were you saying to yourself to keep these payers on board besides, well, I got to justify a salary?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So obviously, how am I going to supplement my income? But then I was really worried about what was I going to tell the doctors? Because I've always felt like, and I don't know if this was true or not, but it's what I believed, is the doctors were going to send to me out of convenience. They're going to say you did a good job, right? You do great therapy. But if I can't send you, 50% of my business that I'm already seeing, and I have to put certain ones aside to send to you, that just creates way more work for them. And so I could see them deciding, well, hey, listen, let's just go with somebody that takes all the insurances. We're busy. It's just way too much for us to try to give him the ones that he specifically wants. So, yeah, so I was worried about the docs. Definitely.
And that's a common refrain. You want the referral process to be as easy as possible because nowadays, well, from my experience at least, nowadays doctors almost don't care too much where you go for therapy as long as they'll just give a prescription to a patient and say, here's a list of providers or physical therapy providers that we like, and just see who's in your network and go. It kind of leaves it to their own device, and you want to make that grease those wheels as easily as possible. But what has been your experience since then?
Well, there were, I want to say maybe 13, 14, 15 docs that we regularly see from, right? Consistently we're seeing from. And of those physicians, only one has kind of backed away.
Really?
But all of the others, Yeah, all the others, they're still sending, and they're sending consistently. And the other thing is too, is they're sending us their patients that are now out of network.
Hmm.
It's not just as if they're saying, okay, well, let's set aside these ones that we know they're in network with. They're sending us they're out of network, and we're, disclosing that information to the patients even before they're coming in. And yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I was a little surprised about that.
Yeah. And I've never really, even though I used that, I understand that thought process. I've seen physicians do the same thing. They've tapped out of networks here and there, right? And so when you can share that information, like, I'm going out of network because we're getting cut, and I can't afford to keep taking this insurance. They understand the game, and they can say, yeah, I had to do the same, or at least they understand, right?
I feel like especially those doctors that are kind of in a solo practice, they understand that so much more than these large groups. It's difficult to even get into those guys anyway.
Yeah. So when you went through that experience, what did it give you a little bit more confidence in saying, oh, okay, maybe this wasn't such a big deal?
Yeah, 100%. So all of the little worries that I had, whether that be, the doctor or the patient's going to be a little fed up with me as well, especially those who are out of network, they're all just going to run. What are their comments going to be? All of those things kind of that kept me up at night, did not come to fruition at all.
Really?
Obviously we lost patients. We're going to lose patients naturally because of going out of network. But those other worries about physicians not sending to me anymore, patients being upset, none of that happened.
Yeah, interesting, man. What was the ultimate mindset shift? So you had this mindset that I need to keep taking this insurance because it covers my salary at least, well, no, I'm not going to do this anymore to myself. I'm not going to do this for my business. I deserve better. What was there a tipping point? Was there something that happened that made you think I need to actually take this step?
Well, obviously we've been talking about it for a while, right? So the coaching was major. Another thing too is, and I think this was from the coaching, is I started to notice that I just resented the patients. I mean, I wanted them to be there and I wanted to give good care, but I found myself resenting them because I knew I wasn't making any money. And here I am, I'm trying to give good care and I'm losing money by them coming in. In fact, I think you'd said, hey, listen, the best thing to do with these patients is just give them $20 when they show up, because
and turn them away. Save your time.
Right? Then you're not losing the time on top of. And so that kind of came into my mind a bit too. And then I went through a course, a positive intelligence course. The book was Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Shamin. So I went through that. It's a 6-week course, and it just helped me focus a little bit more on the abundance and be able to retrain my brain so that I'm not constantly focused on those negative feelings or those negative emotions or everything that can come as a result of dropping this. And it just helped me, it just kind of opened up my view to all of the possibilities that come once I drop that. There's so much out there. And I almost felt like I was just enclosed in that mindset where this is the only way to operate. This is the only way you can do this. And once I dropped that, then it just opened up tons of possibilities. And so that positive intelligence course just kind of taught me the exercises, the mindfulness exercises to be able to get to that point or get in that position to make that decision.
Did you find yourself asking different questions? And I'm not trying to be leading, but I find with my own experience that when I start saying, well, I can't do that, or I'm not going to do that, instead of saying, well, what would I need to do in order to accomplish blank, right? Or instead of focused on the negative things, did you find yourself asking different questions, or did you just have a different perspective?
Well, I think it was a different perspective that led to different questions, because now the questions weren't, oh no, what am I going to do? How am I going to supplement this? The numbers don't work. It was, okay, look at this. Look what happened here. So now what can we do? So should we drop this other insurance? Is there another service we can do? How do we supplement this? What else is out there? There were so many, I don't know. I just felt like so many opportunities opened up because I wasn't constantly spending all of my energy on that scarcity, in a sense, in losing something, but more so on, hey, what else there to gain? I feel like it almost goes back to those same numbers in terms of how many people actually utilize physical therapy, right? What do we say,
Yeah.
10, 11% of the population?
10
And
is
so,
that population that actually needs physical therapy, that would
yes,
qualify with musculoskeletal injuries, get the therapy
yeah,
they need. Yeah.
yeah. And how many are actually accessing the physical therapy?
Right.
Just a fraction of that. So, when you look at those total numbers, you just think, okay, well, there's so many other people out there that we can, market to, or different systems that we can set up to allow other types of business to come in here. So yeah, it just opened up my mindset and my views to not so much the negativity, but the positivity, and see what else is available.
And I remember talking to you, and this was about a year ago. So we're in December 2022. It was December 2021. You had turned in your 90-day termination letter with the contract, with the payer, right? And I was impressed that you had some reservations, but you were committed. You said, "This is what I know I need to do. This is what I'm going to do." How did you maintain that positivity through that 90-day period? Because I'm sure there were times where you were thinking, "Oh crap, what did I just do?" But then there was also the roller coaster other end where you're excited about the future and punching out the numbers and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to go from $67 a visit to $85 a visit, and my profit margin is going to be blank now." Finally, how did you maintain that positive attitude through the valleys of self-doubt?
I may have mentioned this before, but when my wife and I were talking, we just went all the way with it in terms of everything that could happen. Right. So let's just say the doctors don't send to me anymore. 100%. They just stop sending to me, and patients stop coming, and we can't make payroll, and we lose the business. We lose our house. We lose everything. And we just kind of went to a point to kind of see what that would actually look like. And we realized, hey, listen, that's realistically, whatever. I'm a physical therapist. I can get a job anywhere. I can start over. We can make this happen. So I took it to the very, very end, and to the point where you have nothing, you lose everything. And I think so throughout the process, even though there were dips, it was never, ever going to get to that point. And so everything was positive from there on out.
And now that you've dropped one, maybe I think you've dropped two insurances at this point. Three? Oh yeah. So you're looking at it from a perspective of, we're getting lean, mean, profitable, right? And you have a significant amount of confidence at this point. Is there anything you would have done differently if you simply talked to yourself a year ago? Or did you feel like you really kind of followed the right steps? Or just for people who are listening, who are looking forward, would you have done anything differently?
There's a couple of things I did learn along the way that I would just go back and tell myself.
Okay.
One of those is that I was very concerned about charging the patient up front before we really knew how much the insurance was going to reimburse us for out of network.
Really?
Even though I set the price, I wasn't quite, I was nervous about saying, hey, well, you've got to pay this, and then we'll kind of see what the insurance does. And what I've noticed is that the more confident we are in our service and the value we offer, and patients are willing to pay for that, because it is a service that they need. And so upfront, this is what it is. We're very matter of fact about it. And so I would like to tell myself, hey, listen, people are going to be willing to pay for that because they're getting a good service here. So don't approach it again with just this mindset of, oh no, what are they going to do? Are we going to lose them? They're going to hear that number. No, this is what it is. This is what we offer. So go into it with a little more confidence.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because the patient is going to feel that. If you're saying, well, we're going to charge you $135 a visit with some trepidation, then they're going to say, are you sure you want to charge $135?
Yeah.
Versus someone who comes in confidently and says, we charge $135 a visit. This is what we're plan of care that we're going to use to get you better, blank, blank, blank. You come in this many times and you're going to see the value from the therapy, right? And it sounds like as you've gained that confidence, or at least spoken confidently, the patients have responded appropriately.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was too. My front office was great in terms of saying, listen, this is what it is. Here's what this entails. This is what you're going to be getting from it, and list some of the services that would not necessarily be covered by an insurance company anyway. But yeah, they were very confident in how they presented it as well. So that made a big difference.
Is that some training that you had to do with the entire team when you're saying, hey, we're going to charge some out of network rates and we need to be speaking the same language, have the same story, talk confidently from a place of we provide value? Is that something you had to train?
Yeah. We sat down as a staff and talked about the changes that we were going to be making. And obviously we went over that, but I wanted to also address, hey, listen, this clinic isn't going to be near as chaotic, right? We're not going to have near the number of people coming in and out of here. So we can, focus a lot on the experience as well. And part of that experience is, hey, how do we present this to the patient when they come in? Their copay isn't going to be $10, $15, but it's going to be this. So how do we present this in a way that, or we may think maybe 135 is a lot, but they're not going to think that. Who knows what their copayment is, or what they're paying deductible, or what they had to pay for lab work, or whatever that may be.
Right.
So we'll, in a sense, that this is the value, this is the service we're offering. Here's the price.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised? You dropped the contract, and I remember the day you were going to let your therapist go. I think I talked to you that day and talked you out of it, because here was the therapist who's aligned with you, on all that stuff. And you were going to let her go, and I asked you to just keep her for a little bit and see what happened. Were you surprised that you took that 6-week dip and came back almost to where you were before, total visits wise?
It'll be difficult, right? I don't want to get on here and say, well, we dropped this insurance and what do you know? We were now making this much more, and our visits didn't go down dramatically, and everything was great, because they do. There are months there where I wasn't making anything, and we had to find ways to supplement that through, attorney liens, higher payer workers comp, whatever it was, and those take time as relationships have to grow. But it was just a matter of supplementing that. So that's one of the first things I'd probably tell people, and then just changing that mindset again,
right?
Getting your mind in such a place that you feel like you're not constantly worried about what's going to happen, And this is one of the things my wife kind of said to me too. We were talking in the kitchen one night, and she's like, I'm like, well, okay, we dropped these insurances. Now these doctors aren't going to send to me. Now I'm not going to be able to make payroll, right? All of those things. She's like, and she said, okay, what if, let's go all the way with it. She's like, what if you can't make payroll? What happens? Right. We just went all the way down. I'm like, oh yeah, well then we lose our house. She's like, okay, we lose our house. Then where do we go? What happened? We just kind of laid it all the way out there. And I got to the point to where I was like, okay, yeah, let's just do this then.
I'm okay with the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Because it really isn't as bad as you imagined it to be.
Exactly.
Right. And it never gets that bad. That's the thing.
Exactly. It just doesn't.
Right.
You'll figure a way around it. You will.
Yeah.
And that way is going to be different for everybody.
Yours and my friend Pratik in San Francisco, he dropped United Healthcare. Oh, when was that? About 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 6 months ago. And he says it's actually improved his cash flow, because now he charges patients out of pocket. I don't know how much, and I don't want to speak for Pratik, and they'll bill the patients out of network benefits. And if they pay the clinic anything, they'll give that money back to the patient up to the amount that is owed per visit. And so for him, now he's getting a greater amount on the date of service than he was before. And it's actually been better cash flow instead of waiting for 30 months or 30 days for an insurance to pay, right? It's different for everybody. But what I was impressed with the way you went through this the entire time was that you followed a plan. I said, well, when are you going to drop him? Well, I'm going to drop him here, because at that point, I know that my attorney liens are going to be a little bit higher, and that would supplement the reimbursement rates and increase them significantly if I get a higher number of those patients. And then you had a step-by-step plan. At so-and-so time, I'm going to drop Blue Cross Blue Shield once we've stabilized. And then I can see my reimbursement rate getting even higher to this number. So you had a plan about it, and you weren't just, hoping for the best and crossing your fingers and doing this little exercise that your coach told you to do.
Right. I have to attribute that plan to your coaching, what we had talked about. Eventually, yes, this is where I want to get to, but these are the steps I need to take. And going through that together with you too, just helped to almost solidify that plan in a sense.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that now this feeling that you have about your capabilities as an owner has somewhat improved, if I'm not speaking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you think about for the previous 15 years or whatever it was, I was just ignoring the business as I treat patients. And now that I'm actually working on the business, acting as an owner, doing duties as an owner would, right? That you gain more confidence in your ability to lead and to be an owner and to address issues. And, the list goes on and on. So, yeah, it's the whole exercise of just being able to step away and see the bigger picture. That's empowering in and of itself. Yeah,
definitely. That's amazing. If people wanted to ask you questions about your experience or just get some advice, if you're willing to share, are you willing to share how they can contact you?
Yeah, definitely. So contact me through my email, which is steve@achieveptlv.com. You're welcome to text me too. And my cell number is 702-354-6393. So yeah, reach out to me if you have any questions.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being open for those who might have questions, but also thank you for sharing your experience today. It was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. Enjoy it.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.